So 6263 is going to be properties of parallelogram. So a parallelogram is going to look like these. Okay, so definition of a parallelogram. A quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides being parallel. Okay, so you can see that this one is parallel to this one. And this one is parallel to this one, so they should never intersect. Okay, so we can see that B and C are consecutive angles, and A and C are opposite angles. They sit across from each other. And AB and CD are opposite sides. So AB, CD, opposite sides, as well as BC and AD. Okay, theorem, opposite sides of parallelograms. So a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if and only if the opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so that means this side being congruent to this side, and this side being congruent to this side. So the opposite sides are congruent. You can see by this. So we have AB being congruent to CD, which means they're the same, and BC being congruent to DA. Okay? You can also do the opposite. So if I have opposite sides being congruent, then it means it's a parallelogram. Okay, for what values of x and y must each figure be a parallelogram? So we said if the opposite sides are congruent, if they're congruent, it means they're the same, which means we can set them equal to each other. So let's take this side and this side. So I'm going to take 4x equals 3x plus 5, subtract 3x, so x equals 5. So the value of x is going to be 5, so now we got to do the other one. So y plus 3, set it equal to 2y minus 1, because they're opposite sides. Subtract y. 3 equals y minus 1, add 1, so y equals 4. So x equals 5 and y equals 4. Now I'm going to erase this so that I can do the other one and have enough space. Okay, so we're going to do opposite sides again. So I am going to look at this. I'm going to pick these two sides and set them equal to each other because right now they only contain the variable x. So it should be pretty easy to solve. So 4x plus 20 is equal to x plus 26. So let's subtract x. So we have 3x plus 20 equals 26. Subtract 20. 3x equals 6. Divide by 3. So now we have x representing 2. So when I do my next one, my opposite sides, this one and this one, I'm going to have 7y set equal to 6x plus 9, but we found x, so I'm going to take out x and put 2 in its place so that I'm only representing one variable so I can figure out what that variable is. So I have 7y equals 12 plus 9, so now 7y equals 21, divide both sides by 7, so now y equals 3. So we're going to say opposite sides of the parallelograms you can set equal to each other. Okay, consecutive angles of a parallelogram. A quadrilateral is a parallelogram if and only if its consecutive angles are supplementary. Okay, so if we look at the picture, angle A and angle B should add together to be 180 degrees. If you want to extend your lines, you can see why. So if I extended this parallel line and this parallel line, and this is my transversal, angle A and angle B are alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles should always equal 180 degrees. So all of my consecutive angles listed here should equal 180 degrees. Okay, and then the opposite, if all of my consecutive angles equal 180 degrees, we know that it's a parallelogram. So basically, angles that sit next to each other, like A and B or B and C, they should always equal 180 degrees. Okay, opposite angles. So angles that sit across from each other. So a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if and only if the opposite angles are congruent. Okay, so now we just have the opposite angles being congruent. So if you have a parallelogram, that means my opposite angles are congruent, or the reverse, if I have my opposite angles being congruent, it means it's a parallelogram. And I'm going to show you the explanation. So let's say I extend this transversal and extend these parallel lines. Right now I have angle B being here. Its alternate interior angle right now is right here. Okay, so alternate interior angles should always be congruent, which means they should be the same. And now if you look at these parallel lines, angle A here and angle D are corresponding angles, which are also congruent. So you can kind of see how they match up if you extended all of your parallel lines and transversals. Okay, so now we got to use the two pieces of information we just learned to figure out what some of these are. So angle 1 and angle 75, we said if they sit next to each other, they should equal 180 degrees. So I'm going to take 180 minus 75 to find the measure of angle 1. So I have the measure of angle 1 being 105 degrees. Now 75 and 2 are opposite each other, so they should be the same. So the measure of angle 2 now is 75 degrees. So now let's try our other one. Let's erase this work so we have some space. Alright. Well, all triangles should equal 180 degrees. So to find the measure of angle 3, let's add that to 113 and 45 and set it equal to 180 to find the measure of angle 3. So 180 minus 113 minus 45. So the measure of angle 3 should be 22 degrees. Okay, and then we kind of see our parallelogram here if we just look at our outside. So 113 and angle 1 are opposite each other, so they should be the same. So the measure of angle 1 now is 113 degrees. And then if we add this together, so 45 plus 22 is 67 degrees. So this big angle is 67, and it's its opposite of angle 2 and 3. So that means this angle 2 and 3 should also be 67 degrees, but we found angle 3, so I can find angle 2 based on that. So if I take 67 minus 22, I should get the measure of angle 2. So 67 minus 22 is 45. So the measure of angle 2 is 45 degrees. So now we found 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to erase that so we can do the other one. So my next one, we can find the measure of angle 2 pretty quickly because it creates a straight line. So if I take 180 minus 78, I should get the measure of angle 2. So 180 minus 78, so 102. So the measure of angle 2 is 102 degrees. These are vertical angles, so I automatically know what's across from it. It should also be 78. And now I have a triangle, so I can figure out the measure of angle 3. So I'm going to do the measure of angle 3 plus 78 plus 48. And all triangles should equal 180 degrees. So I'm going to take 180 minus 78 minus that 48. So the measure of angle 3 is now 54 degrees. Okay, and now I need to find the measure of angle 1. So if I draw my parallel lines and the transversal that intersects that, if you look at angle 1 and angle 3, they're alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles should always be the same. So the measure of angle 1 should be the same as the measure of angle 3. So it is also 54 degrees. Okay, the diagonals of a parallelogram. A quadrilateral is a parallelogram if and only if its diagonals bisect each other. So that means they cross each other. Okay, and then they also make some congruencies. So if they cross each other, we have a midpoint, so E, and it is saying that AE is congruent to CE, so you can see the little congruency marks there, and BE is congruent to ED. The reverse, if you have AE being congruent to CE and BE being congruent to DE, then you also have a parallelogram. So to solve one of these, this should be congruent to this, as well as this being congruent to this. So I'm going to pick the one that only has the two variables so I can figure it out. So these should be congruent, which means they are the same, which means I could set them equal to each other. So 2x plus 14 equals 5x minus 4. Let's go ahead and solve. We got to add 4 to both sides, so I have 18 equals 3x divide by 3, so x equals 6. Now we need to find y, so I need to set my other set equal to each other. So x into y, so I have x equals 2y. I found x, so let's go ahead and plop it in so we can figure out what y is. Divide by 2, so we have y representing 3. So that is x and y. That would make that a parallelogram. Now I'm going to erase it so we can do the other one. Okay, so I'm going to pick the one with the variables that are the same, but it looks like we have x's and y's in both of them. So let's look at this. This one, if I set them equal to each other, I'd get x equals y plus 2. My other set here, I would get y plus 10 equals 2x minus 8. So what we're going to do is substitution. So since x represents the same thing as y plus 2, we're going to plop that in for x. So now I'm going to get y plus 10 equals 2 times, let me plug that all in, so that y plus 2, where I take out x, put y plus 2 in. Now let's go ahead and solve, so I got to distribute this too. So y plus 10 equals 2y plus 4 minus 8. Y plus 10 equals 2y minus 4. Subtract 1. So I have 10 equals y minus 4, add 4. So now I have y representing 14. So to find x, we need to plop it back into an equation. Let's plop it into this one because it looks like it's the easiest. So I have x equals 14 plus 2. So x now represents 16. So you could use substitution to also figure out these problems. I just substituted y plus 2 in for x and then solved for y to get the one variable to find the number.